Hey, what is good, people? Welcome to the second installment. Yes, I filmed a second episode of the Wheel Culture podcast. I think that's what's going to be called. If that isn't the name, then there's just going to be a blank space here. And that blank space is for the name that I haven't thought of yet. Anyway, my name is Wale, and I'm looking forward to taking you through this podcast. So we kind of based this, I'm kind of by myself here. I've based this on the Pareto principle. So it's like a 70-20-10 when it comes to, predominantly it's going to be about car culture, but some of it will also be probably about cycling. So 70% cars, 20% cycling, and probably 10% random stuff that I think is just cool to mention at a time. So how are we going to kick off this episode? Well, the first thing I think I want to talk about is what it's like being a car guy without car friends. So this isn't to say that I don't have friends. I've got plenty of amazing friends, but if you, like me, are a bit more into cars than the average person, then you've probably had variations of this conversation where people ask you things like, maybe they ask you, but people ask for your opinion when it comes to car related things, whether it's find a mechanic, what car to choose, or they tell you that they saw a really interesting car. Oh, I saw this really cool car, you'd love it. I say, okay, so what car was it then? Tell me, what was it? What make was it? What manufacturer? I don't know, but it was black, it was low, and it was fast. And then they kind of smile at me like I should just sort of know what car it is based on that description. And then my heart begins to sink a little bit at that point. But what's kind of funny about this is, for me, I'm someone that's always been, not always, but for a while, I've been trying to find a group of like car friends, or just people that I can hang out with that are really into cars. And so one of these, I would go to different meets and try to meet up with different groups of people and try and kind of like find these friends. But what's always interesting to me, or what seems to be continually interesting to me, is that most people that I meet at a meet seem to have met their friends outside of cars. And wherever I seem to go, I don't seem to make sort of car related friends or mates. I kind of meet people, but I'm maybe slightly awkward in nature. And so what I find is that, you talk to people, maybe meet up with them, and then it's a bit weird because aside from cars, everything else about being friends with them kind of doesn't really make the most sense. Maybe they've just come from a completely different walk of life, or they're just into things that you're not really interested in. And so you kind of bond on the car stuff, but then the other stuff is just maybe people that you wouldn't naturally come across in your day-to-day life. It reminds me of the time that I went to Edmonton, and so there used to be this car meet in Edmonton. It was in a car park, and I wish I could remember where it is. If I can remember where it is, then I'll put it on screen or something. But what was interesting is that the first time I went, I took my girlfriend, who's now my wife, but at the time she was my girlfriend, I took her with me, and she absolutely hated it, but that's a different story. But so I went to this car park in Edmonton, and it's weird because you look at things like Fast and the Furious, and you're never really sure what to expect the first time you go to a car meet. But it's like people kind of, this idea of like people like kind of flexing and just sort of showing off their cars and stuff it's really weird when you see it in person. Like when you watch it on a video, it seems cool. Some guy doing like drifts and donuts and burnouts and stuff. But then when you're at a car meet and someone just randomly, I don't know, lowers their car or has their car riding on three wheels. I saw that with a Fiesta. Crazy. I know. Fiesta had air ride suspension and it was like on three wheels somehow. But you see like people just suddenly doing a burnout. Like in the video, when you're watching videos, it seems like, okay, it kind of makes sense, but it's not an organized thing. It's just someone randomly deciding, hey, I'm going to do a burnout, or I'm going to start revving my engine. And it's funny being there and being in that environment and experiencing that versus what it kind of seems like when I used to watch it on videos. Anyway, at this car meet in Edmonton, what was interesting was that they had inside the car park, only certain cars were kind of like allowed to park in there, or only certain, it was more like the sort of showy kind of cars that were parked in there. But what was even more interesting is that in this car park, people basically take it in turn to do donuts in the middle of the car park. And, I respected the people that parked around the edge because I would be very conscious of, amateur sort of drifters, or who I assume to be amateur drifters. Maybe they're pros, I don't know. But these sort of seemingly amateur kind of people, just drifting round and round in this car park. There wasn't really a lot of runoff space, so it was interesting because if you do get it wrong, then you're going into a bunch of cars. But I remember what really sticks out in my head about this meet, aside from the fact that I didn't really make any new friends there, because making friends at a car meet is really hard. I don't know, maybe I'm quite awkward, maybe that's it, but you kind of talk to people and then it's like, hey, you like cars too? It's okay, yeah. But anyway, so there's this guy that I'm speaking to that I spoke to when I was there, and I'm pretty sure he had like a one of those rubber bands that people have around their wrists. I can't remember what they're called. That was like a Livestrong one that a lot of people were wearing at that point in time. What is it? I can't remember what the name is, but one of those rubber wristbands that support some sort of cause. But this guy had one made that was called it was like King of the Ring or something like that, or Drift King. It was some sort of version of King of the Ring or Drift King of the Ring or something to that effect. But it's funny because he basically got this thing printed up and it just seemingly self-appointed himself the king of drifting in this area, which is like this car park, which I'm guessing obviously wasn't owned by him or anyone he knew, because I think the next time that I tried to go back to that meet, which was maybe a couple of months later, somebody had put sleeping policemen, and so sleeping policemen was what they're called in the UK, but they're speed bumps everywhere else. So someone basically put speed bumps inside the car park. Now, that might not sound unusual to you, but what was unusual about this is that the car park wasn't that big. So it was like, I want to say 50 square meters, but I'm probably getting that wrong. But it wasn't a particularly big car park. But it's quite square. But what was really interesting about the speed humps they put in was that they basically put them around in a circle. So rather than sort of speed humps being laid at sort of perpendicular to the road, it basically they'd put the speed bumps in the worst place possible, or to make drifting as hard as possible. And I think when I went there, someone had obviously tried, but it's like it's basically just ruined what was this guy's kind of drift pit. And yeah, that was really, I don't know, that was really funny to me. But I do find just this idea of being like a car guy and trying to meet other car people quite interesting, because yeah, you think, oh, I'm really into cars, you're really into cars, and then you talk to somebody and maybe they're not as into it as you are, or they're kind of like, yeah, I'm more here for the sort of the vibe and stuff, or I've just come with my mates, and you're trying to like meet new people. It really, yeah, it really, I don't know, it's a really weird experience. Really keen to hear what your experiences might be. So please do comment in the chat, or comment wherever I end up posting this, about your experiences with trying to meet other car guys. I think it's quite an interesting thing in general, because like the car community can be really amazing at times. And so I've been on the forums and like you kind of see people who have like massive personalities on forums, and then you meet them in real life and sometimes it can be a bit disappointing. It's a massive user at one point, a power user you could say, not necessarily a power poster, but definitely read a lot on the TT forum. And so a part of me does kind of feel like that time of having I don't know, do people still go on forums the way that they used to? Maybe because I don't have a car that I'm as into at the moment anymore. I've got a Golf, by the way, nothing special, it's Mark 5. But maybe it's because I don't I'm not as into my car and modifying it as I used to be. But it seems as though forums have died a little bit. And yeah, just as I spoke about in the last episode of sort of max power, that kind of going away, I do wonder if like the celebration, so to speak, of sort of grassroots car modification, or people who modify, cars that they drive on a daily basis, or cars that are their own personal cars that aren't maybe just show cars, or aren't just some sort of financed Audi or Volkswagen with a tune and maybe some nice wheels, possibly with some air ride. I do feel like a lot of modifications kind of gone that way, where it's kind of lost a bit of its je ne sais quoi. Am I saying that we should bring back big body kits? Not necessarily, but I do kind of miss the days of going to a meet and seeing people with really kind of take pride in their expression or their interpretation of what they feel like a cool car looks like. Sometimes I'd agree, sometimes I don't agree, but I think I always appreciate the fact that you kind of go to these meet and you meet these characters and people that kind of have done interesting things to their cars, and that they aren't just that everything isn't just the same, isn't just a cookie cutter kind of approach. Moving on. Yeah, moving on from that. So I went on the weekend, I think it was the weekend last week, I forget, but for argument's sake, or just for the sake of this recording, I went to Porsche the other day. I went to a Porsche dealership it was somewhere in East London. I went to go and get the windscreen replaced on my car on Golf because it had a crack in it and it was going to be used for my wife's driving test. That's the story in itself, but one for maybe for the next episode. But yeah, so I was gone to get the windscreen replaced in my wife's. Well, I call it my wife's because I kind of consider it her car, but for argument's sake, the family Golf, and I'd gone to it was in Galleon's Reach, so the Porsche dealership is somewhere near Galleon's Reach. As a side note, Galleon's Reach is a bit of a tired-looking area. And I'm sure I'm going to get lambasted for that. But yeah, when I went there, it just seemed, I don't know, maybe because it was raining that day, let's put it down to the rain, but it did seem a little bit depressing. There was a Wingstop there, and that was interesting. I wanted to go there, but the queue was way too long. But yeah, it just seems a bit, I don't know, it just seemed a bit tired. But again, don't kill me in the comments. But yeah, so I've gone to get the windscreen replaced. On the way back, past the Porsche dealership, and I thought, you know what? Why not? Let's just go in there and have a look. And it's weird. In my mind, what had happened was I got there and I'm driving through to what I think is the customer car park, but all I'm seeing is Porsches. Obviously, you see Porsches at a Porsche dealership, but it was just Porsches. And then as I kind of went around to the front, I realised that I was at the front of the sort of, not the courtyard, but the sort of, all the cars there were sale cars, and there was literally like hardly any parking for customers, and there was maybe 3 cars there that weren't Porsches, which sounds really obvious, but I was just surprised by how many Porsches that I saw there, because I thought there'd be, I don't know, a couple of other cars that just weren't Porsches. But anyway, so I parked the car at the back. It's not really seen. Now, what's interesting about this is when I went to the dealership, in my mind, I thought they were going to be like, I don't know if you've ever been into like a luxury or high-end sort of like clothing store like Louis Vuitton or Gucci or something like that. Not that I shop there, but at least my experience has been in the past when I went there. There's almost like this air of slight like snobbiness in a way. And again, this probably predates what the experience is like now. But I remember going in there in the past because I don't really tend to shop at those types of places. But I remember going there and just and asking about how much things cost, and there was an attitude that, and so maybe it was just the person in this store. Let's say that. But there was an attitude that the person in the store had that really stuck with me. And it was just this kind of air of why are you asking? You obviously can't afford it. And I think that just stuck in my head for a long time, that this idea that someone who works in a retail job, respectfully, nothing wrong with that, but again, on what is more likely to be a retail salary, possibly with some commission, probably isn't going to be making much more than the average person makes from retail. Maybe I'm wrong on that, I don't know, but it was really kind of funny to me that this person that was dealing with me had like such an attitude, considering that, as if to say, that working in the shop means you can afford all the things there. And I thought, well, our salaries might be similar, so at the time anyway, so yeah, whatever, man. I forget that point. Let's just move on. Yeah, but I went into this Porsche dealership, and I was half expecting to be kind of treated badly or looked down on in some way. And so I went to the counter and said, "Oh, have you got any Porsche GT3s?" Don't have GT3 money, but I have GT3 ambition and hope. So I went in there, asked to see one, and oh yeah, go over this way. Then it showed me to like this person that was there. There was 2 GT3s there. One of them was actually a customer car. I think they had some sort of event there, and the other one was like I think it was a show car, but I'm not really sure because it seemed like, I'm not sure it was a demo car or what, but it had I think it's Mante. Is it Mante? Manthe? I'm probably saying that wrong, but it's like a track-orientated tuning company that Porsche bought a share of recently. Not recently, but Porsche bought a share of. And so they kind of do like aftermarket parts for Porsches, but they're sort of supposed to be really high-end, kind of bleeding edge of race technology, that sort of thing. Well, anyway, yeah, I went to this dealership, and it was interesting because it kind of feels like it's changed from what it was when I was from sort of when I was younger when I went there. Like it was more of a experience Like being in the dealership was just, I was surprised by how nice everyone was to me. I asked, can I sit in the car? I didn't even like take any pictures. I was just so kind of like, in awe of this GT3. It was like this sort of pinky purple color, and there's a grey one. But the one I sat in was like a pinky purple color. I'm going to find out exactly what the color was. But, yeah, just sitting in it and kind of like, firstly, actually, 911, not as much space as I thought there'd be inside there. And so I remember going to Audi, a couple of years back to go and look at an R8. Wasn't buying, but you know, I have R8 ambition. So I went to go and look at this R8 and, I sat inside it. And so it was a new one because I'd done a track day or sort of like an experience day in the model before. And I can't remember, I don't know specifically what the model names are, but it's like the first R8, there's a Mark 1 R8 and a Mark 2 R8. And so not the facelift, the actual Mark 2 that has slightly different lights. So the first one, Mark 1, I drove an experience day and that was fine, I fit in that. And then the second one, the Mark 2, I went to the showroom to try it out with one of my friends. He is a car guy as well, funny enough, but I don't see anywhere near enough of, because he works, not in the airport, but for an airline, and so he works shift work for like an airline, so it doesn't get to see a lot. But anyway, so yeah, so when I was at Audi, that's what I was saying. So when I was at Audi, yeah, I find that I couldn't really fit in the car. It was just a little bit too tight, and I was quite disappointed because it was kind of like one of those sort of grail kind of vehicles, and I kind of had a similar experience like that with the Porsche a little bit. Now I put it down to the fact that maybe because it's got bucket seats, maybe don't go quite back as far because the roll cage is in the back of the GT3, but hopefully that isn't it. Still was a really nice car. Really love the design of Porsches. I mean, the GT3 RS would be like the dream, but we'll see how things go. But yeah, being in that car is really nice, and I was really taken aback by how I was treated at the dealership. And I guess maybe it's because, you know, we're in this sort of internet age where practically not anybody, but people from all sort of different walks of life are in a position to be able to afford, you know, really nice vehicles, really high-end vehicles. And so what the typical GT3 buyer looks like now is probably quite different from what it was once upon a time. But yeah, I had a really nice chat with the lady there. She took my email address. She actually hasn't sent me an email yet, but yeah, we'll see. So I had a look at the car, sat in it, spoke to another guy there who had a Porsche Taycan, but had put an order in for a GT4. Is it called a GT4? The irony of me not really being sure now. But yeah, he put an order in for a, it's the Porsche, the 718. So it's Cayman. I think it's the GT4. Yeah. And so he had an order in for that. Said he's hoping to get it in like sort of within the next 2 to 3 months. Yeah, I had a nice chat with him. And then I had to leave because I had to go and pick up my son from nursery. And the woman was trying to get me to stay and like have tea and coffee and all sorts of things. And that was really nice. And it felt really like, so, you know, credit to people at Porsche, particularly in that dealership. I haven't been to the other ones yet, but that experience it was really nice. And, yeah, definitely was, not what I was expecting. Another thing is what was kind of disappointing is that, I know we're kind of like in the internet age now, but I really miss being able to get brochures for cars from the dealership. Like, you know, just having like a really nicely printed brochure for a car. Really nice paperweight, you know, the glossy cover, really high quality printing and photography. I kind of miss that. And I think it's a shame that, that doesn't seem to be a thing so much anymore. It would be nice if those were brought back, especially for some of like the nicer cars, like a Porsche GT3 RS brochure would be so nice. But maybe, I don't know, maybe because maybe there is a way to get those sorts of things, or maybe they still are produced. But for what I'm seeing, they aren't really that common in dealerships anymore. Speaking of dealerships as well, what is quite interesting is that it seems that dealerships may be going away, or at least the business model might be changing. Like, as manufacturers, maybe particularly of higher end cars, moving towards maybe like slightly kind of small volume or low footprint sort of dealership type model, and selling more sort of higher value cars, I guess. Yeah. Well, I was reading an article about Range Rover, and I think it was Range Rover, and it said they were buying back dealerships from or buying back franchises from Range Rover dealership owners with under the proviso that they would get preferential treatment when it came to certain EV models and things like that, I think. And I thought that was quite interesting because, yeah, I mean, it does make me think that companies like Tesla have kind of come along and, through no fault of their own, changed and I suppose revolutionized the auto industry in many ways. And kind of you see a lot of manufacturers now moving towards EV. Even Rolls-Royce recently brought out a new EV called the Spectre, which is, I think, it's quite a cool name, but it does make me think of James Bond. So that's interesting. But yeah, like, it does make me wonder, what is the future for car dealerships? Will they just become experience centers, or are we kind of moving towards this kind of more commoditized? Are cars becoming more of like a product, not commodity, like more of a product? So in the sense of something you buy, like a TV or a PlayStation or a laptop, where they don't really kind of, people don't really look at them in the same way. And it'll be interesting to see what the future is with regards to EVs and how people own cars. Yeah, and I think I even saw a stat which was like by 2025, 50% of dealerships will have gone or closed. And so yeah, it's an interesting space that we're in. I think when you look at what is a car and what is the future for cars, and as I mentioned in the last episode, we're talking about sort of this idea of finance, and where you've got a company like Volvo that allows you to buy access to a vehicle. So you don't actually buy the vehicle, but you don't lease the vehicle, but you on a plan, almost like a gym membership, where you can go and access a vehicle at a certain price point or certain level, depending on how much you're paying per month. And you never own the car, and after, I think, three months, you can get rid of it, or you can end the contract. It isn't like you're stuck into it for a whole year, like you are or for years with a finance plan. There's no balloon payment. You just literally just pay a certain amount per month, and you can access a certain level of vehicle. And so, yeah, I do think that it's quite interesting looking at the dealership model and how is that likely to change in the coming years. I do think that there could be a case for dealerships becoming maybe more of an experience center. In America, at least, I don't know what the legality is around car manufacturers kind of getting rid of dealerships and selling direct to the consumer. Like, I wonder, does that kind of reduce things like competition and kind of prevent? In fact, I'm not even sure if it's actually legal in the States because of how the law works over there. Is it legal for manufacturers to sell directly to the customer? I mean, Tesla do it, so I don't know. It'd be interesting to see if like maybe they kind of look at EVs as being something slightly different from petrol vehicles, and so they use that as a loophole as to how manufacturers can sell direct to the consumer. Okay. Speaking of dealerships, or moving away from dealerships, one of the things I think is quite interesting is trying to find a good mechanic. I remember when I was younger, going to a few places, and I think my biggest concern with mechanics was always, finding the wrong one or going with the wrong one, and the potential downside of finding a mechanic who maybe is a bit dishonest or maybe exaggerates what his ability is like. I mean, if you look at there's a channel on YouTube called Living Life Fast, and there's this series that he's done where a mechanic was supposed to, I think, rebuild his Honda Civic that he'd bought, and sort of meant to put like a limited slip differential into it and make it four-wheel drive, and all these really cool, interesting sounding things. But the guy basically took the money, kind of started the job and cut his car up into pieces, cut up a bit into pieces, or pieces, but cut holes in it to do the work. But then he didn't do the work, disappeared, didn't give him any money, stopped responding to his calls, and so now there's like this kind of, I don't know if you call it a hunt to find him, but they're looking to, he's trying to kind of raise awareness and I suppose hopefully get his money back. But it's a bit weird that, as you said, it's a bit weird that he would choose to try and rip off a YouTuber, especially a YouTuber like LLF, or Live Life Fast, his name's Ricky. Like, he hasn't got a small channel, and so you would have seen that he's got a channel, he's got quite a large following. And, the world is, as much as the world is a big place, it's also quite a small place. And so somebody knows somebody who knows somebody. And so people are coming out and sort of, it's kind of like a series that he's done. So people are coming out and talking about this guy that has ripped them off and how he's ripped off other people in the past. And it sort of seems to be his mode of operation, where he kind of starts up a new establishment, gets some business in, takes a bunch of money from people, starts a bunch of jobs, has their cars, and then doesn't do the work. And so in some cases he'll like just ditch the cars somewhere or abandon them. And so it's like, I'm not, not stealing their cars, but he'll take their money and disappear and leave the car somewhere. I mean, one of the guys, I think he had like it was like a £50,000 Lancia Delta Integrale. It's like a rally spec car. And so, I don't think that was the most expensive car that he's worked on, but I think we'll highlight that as a classic, and that they aren't being made anymore and they aren't easy to find. I think that's really rough going for the person that owned it. This idea that you kind of trusted somebody with your pride and joy, and they kind of just left it in a field or left it in a barn, outside a barn somewhere. It's just been rained on and started to rust in places and things like that. And so yeah, when I was growing up, I'm still growing up, still a child at heart, child of God, hey. But when I was looking for a mechanic rather, when I was younger, one of my biggest worries was finding the wrong one, and the idea that any money that you potentially save by going with like a backstreet mechanic or someone who you might be a bit less dodgy or have a lower price is kind of lost when you have an issue and you have to either get that work done again or go and or try and go back to that mechanic to get problems sorted out. So I mean, to be fair, to begin with, you help avoid yourself having issues, I think, by buying a good car, in the sense of buying something that's got sensible service history, and not just buying for service history, but also buying on condition. So has it been looked after? Did the person that owned it before care about it? Are things missing? Are things broken? And just generally getting a sense of how the car's been cared for. Maybe that's something to speak about a bit more in a future podcast episode. But yeah, one of my biggest worries was finding a good mechanic that I could trust. And so I had a mechanic who wasn't the cheapest, but definitely was a trustworthy mechanic. And so, yeah, he really wasn't the cheapest. I spent a lot of money with him. Not that I needed to do that often, but just the things that I did need to get done weren't the cheapest. So servicing wasn't the cheapest. Brake changes before I started doing them myself wasn't the cheapest. On the TT that I had to get and so this is where having a mechanic that isn't that cheap and then having my mindset isn't necessarily that helpful. Continue the recording. So yeah, having my mindset in some ways isn't helpful. So I think my car had an issue with the clutch, and so there was I think the pedal was going really soft or something like that. I forget exactly where it was, but I remember the problem was that there was a clutch. What was the valve called? Basically, there was a part inside the clutch that had broken. So the clutch itself hadn't gone, but the clutch fluid was leaking in the car into the clutch bell housing because I had what's the part called? I can't remember the name of it, but there's a part that had broken. I think it was a plastic part, and it was allowing clutch fluid or fluid from the clutch, from the transmission, or was it coolant? I forget. It was allowing some sort of fluid to go into the clutch. Now, so it made sense to replace the clutch because the clutch plates were contaminated, but also because of the cost of labour on the TT to change the clutch, you have to drop the subframe, and so a lot of parts have to come off the car. So it's quite a labour intensive job. But what was interesting was that because so the clutch needs to be replaced, and so I thought, well, the clutch has been contaminated. I'll replace the clutch, and I'll replace the part that had broken. I really wish I could remember what that part was. It was some sort of valve, was it? Bleed valve? No, some sort of valve in there. And if I can find the name of it, then I'll send it to you, or I'll post it. But in the video for this. But yeah, so I went there, and then so it's going to cost. I think it was like maybe £500 in labour, maybe even £500 to £700 in labour, something like that. And so the clutch then isn't that expensive. So I should say £100 for the clutch, something like that. But it was like, well, while you're here, you might as well do the dual mass flywheel. And I was like, oh, okay. And I did consider like getting a single mass flywheel conversion, but then that kind of ruins like the ride quality apparently and stuff like that. It's more of a, I think like a race thing. But yeah, the single mass flywheel was cheaper, but it would have changed the way that the car kind of drove, and I wasn't really keen on that. So I thought I'll get a new dual mass flywheel. Maybe I'll get a reconditioned one. Oh, if you get a reconditioned one, then it might be an issue with it. And you might find yourself having to do that again. So I was like, okay, well, I'll get a new one. And then it was like, well, do I get an aftermarket one or an original one? He goes, well, you can get the part yourself and get me to fit it, but if there's an issue, then I'm not going to guarantee the work, and you're going to have to pay a whole load of money again if something happens. And I was like, okay. And so I was like, okay, well, so I want to, you can get original, or you can get like a sort of third party manufacturer. I was like, oh, well, what do you think? He goes, oh, if you get the original, then it's going to last, a while. It's going to be a good quality part. Okay, if you get that aftermarket one, then probably going to be good, but you might have issues with it. Who knows? And so maybe, I don't know, in retrospect now I'm thinking, was that a little bit of fear mongering? I don't know. Possibly not. But in the end, they ended up paying for a brand new clutch, brand new dual mass firewall, which was a £400 part. I'll never forget that. £400 for the dual mass firewall. That pained me. I think in total the bill was something like, was it 1100 or 1500 for the clutch for this car? And I think that's what made me keep because I had the TC for about 9-10 years, something like that. And that was literally the thing that made me keep it for so much longer, because I had it and I thought, I might sell it in about a year or so. But then when that happened, I put all that money into into getting the clutch replaced and the dual mass firewall. It was kind of like this sunk cost effect where, I spent all this money now, so I better get my enjoyment out of it. In retrospect, would I do that again? Possibly not. Probably I'd have gone the cheaper route and just replaced the part and maybe the clutch and kind of like left it at that and saw what happens. But yeah, you kind of live and you learn on that. But anyway, the mechanic was good. I was otherwise happy with what he did. What I did notice though is that because he was kind of like more of an old school mechanic where they kind of like problem solve and things like that. They don't just. Okay, not sure what happened there. Let's see what the last bit was. Yeah, so my recording seems to have stopped for some reason, but anyway, we continue. So he was more of a old school kind of mechanic where he would look at a car and actually try to fault find and kind of solve the issue. Now, I'm not saying that modern mechanics do this, but I think more mechanics now kind of lean to the word. It's interesting. I'd say car repairs now is a little bit different. Cars have more sensors, and so some of it might be a sensor issue, but I think it's easier for a mechanic now to plug in an OBD reader, plug in some sort of diagnostic device, and whatever the fault code says, kind of replace parts based on that. So, there's an issue with this sensor, we'll replace that sensor. Not sensor, okay, we'll replace the part. Whereas he would actually try and, whereas I think older school mechanics would try to find the issue, and fault find more. That's my opinion. Am I right or wrong about that? I don't know. I'm sure you let me know in the comments. But yeah, with this mechanic, he would really look at the faults and try to find what the issues were. And so, what was the point I was trying to make? Yeah, well, I thought he was a good mechanic overall. In the end, he left and he went to I think they bought like a franchise somewhere, maybe down Silverstone, something like that. Yeah, but they're good people. It's funny because one of the dudes was like really grumpy all the time, or at least he seemed really grumpy all the time. And they're two brothers, and they're on the Kent Road, so maybe you know where they are. But I think they've got like an Alpha dealership now. I think they bought an Alpha franchise in their Silverstone, something like that. But yeah, they're two brothers, and the things are both really cool guys. But one brother was like really kind of cheerful and kind of up and more cheery, and the other brother that always seemed like he was always grumpy, like he had the weight of the world on his shoulders. I'm not sure why. I think I asked him about it once, but yeah, he was a cool guy, but he just seemed really grumpy. Funny enough, side story to that, I remember watching a Watch Dogs series about sort of rogue mechanics, and that garage was actually on there, but they were one of the ones that were more honest in their appraisal of that vehicle or what it was the vehicle needed. But anyway, say all that to say, yeah, so I had that mechanic for a number of years. He's the main person that looked after my TT, apart from brakes, because I think brakes are crazy expensive to work I had to do as myself, which is a bit of a scary thing at first, the idea that you kind of taking your life in your hands with brakes. But if you are methodical and you take your time, then there's nothing stopping you from doing that at home. But I would get servicing done there because you want to get the servicing book stamped. Not that mattered in the end with my car, but that is a story for another time. So anyway, they went away and they moved on to their sort of franchise. And I was trying to look for another mechanic. And I'll never forget that I went to this mechanic. I'm going to say this mechanic is on Wharf Road. I'll be kind of vague. But he had a car that was really cool, quite a well-known car. And he was really like a Volkswagen specialist, like an expert. But one of the things that really bothered me about him was that, so I was at my car there because I was having like a, I don't, if you know the TT and the 1.8 engine, there's a lot of hoses in that engine that perform this PCV, positive crankcase ventilation system. And the problem with this system is that when it works, it's supposed to help with like emissions and emissions or levels or something like that. When it works, it's fine. But as cars get older and rubber hoses start to perish and get soft, it can become a bit of a pain as you kind of chase like air leaks around the system. If you get it all replaced at once, then cool. But I think I would get little bits replaced at a time. And so I took it to him this guy to go and look at and said, I'm having this issue. What do you think? And so, guy took my car, didn't message me, didn't call me. I think I called him to ask if it was ready. He said, yeah, he sorted it out. I said, okay, cool. Didn't think much of it. Went down there to pick up my car, and he had basically done a PCV delete. And I was really annoyed, to be honest, because I thought, well, I didn't ask you to do that, I didn't ask you to do this PCV delete. I wanted the car to be relatively stock, and for the most part, it was towards the end it wasn't stock, but yeah, it was. I wanted it to be like OEM plus, and so I was really annoyed that he would just take the decision to do that and not call me or not ask me first. So yeah, there are some rogue, almost unscrupulous people out there. These days, I find that, at least on the Golf, I do most of the maintenance myself. Because it has full DW service history, I kind of want to maintain that. So I take it to Volkswagen to service, and all the other bits that need to be done. Only anything else that comes up, I'll do that myself. But yeah, finding them in the garage has been still really hard. I still don't trust a lot of mechanics. I've seen a lot of mechanics in different areas, but they all just seem to be a bit. Not all, to be fair, not all, but the ones that I think I would like to use are maybe a bit more at the higher price point, and especially when I was younger, they seemed too expensive. And the ones that I were in my price bracket, I never really trusted that they'll do the job the first time, and I'll end up paying twice, in which case I would negate the benefit of having a cheaper mechanic. And I don't know, is there such thing as a mechanic that is like good value for money, particularly in London? Outside London, I imagine that maybe things are a little bit different, but in London, it really does seem like it seemed to me like there was a lot of cowboys, particularly when I was driving the TT and I was maybe a little bit younger. What I also did was, and this isn't a mechanic, but I found an independent MOT centre, and one of my biggest worries was getting ripped off by mechanics for an MOT, because you go there and get MOT, maybe the MOT is a bit cheaper than usual, but then they kind of inflate the work that needs to be done. They'll say, oh, car's not going to pass on this, you need to get this work done. Don't worry, I'll do it for you. And then your 20 quid MOT suddenly becomes a 200 quid or 300 quid kind of bill for stuff that your car maybe doesn't really need. But yeah, so I found a great independent MOT centre in Deptford called the MOT Centre, and I think they give you a fair and accurate assessment of your vehicle for the MOT test. So I do recommend that place. I've gone there for a number of years. In fact, that's the only MOT centre I've really been to, apart from the occasional times I've been to certain mechanics because the car was there anyway. But yeah, MOT Centre in Deptford, it's a great place. The 30 and the 10 that I was talking about earlier on. Drivers versus cyclists. This is an interesting thing for me because I've kind of, for a long time, existed in both camps. And so I think I'm probably more into cars than I am into bicycles, but I've really enjoyed cycling. From a young age, I remember taking a time when everyone else was sort of playing out during summer, and I didn't have a bike, but I'd borrow my friend's bike. And I remember teaching myself, I kind of got a few pointers, but teaching myself more or less to ride a bike. So someone kind of gave me some pointers and I was just practicing. I remember everyone else was kind of like gone off and was having fun. I was just like, no, I really want to ride a bike. And I remember never forget the point where you kind of finally get it and it's like, hey, you can balance yourself and ride along. And that was really cool. And so because of that, bicycles have always been like an interest of mine. It's actually a funny memory I've got when me and my friends were going out on bikes, as you do when you're younger. So this is sort of before driving license kind of age. And I remember I got a bike, and two of my friends got bikes as well. They got BMXs. Can't remember what make they were, but I got a bike, and I think was it a Townsend or Falcon? Anyway, I got a mountain bike, which I was really proud of. It was like silver frame, had red forks, had suspension. Probably wasn't that great, but at the time I really enjoyed it. And I remember getting like a mud guard for the back and wearing I think it was like Fox gloves because I felt like, I looked really cool on my bike. And I'll never forget when me and my friends all went riding. One of them went to go meet one of his friends who's a female. It was just his friend, but we were in the area, so we went to go and say hi. And I'll never forget her saying to me, "Oh, I thought, how come you didn't get a new bike?" I was like, "My bike is new." And for ages I didn't like her, if I'm honest, because of that. After that comment, I thought, yeah, you're dead to me. You're dead to me. I'd never say it because I was shy, but I was upset about that because I was really proud of that bike. But yeah, so I kind of had cycled in various guises. I went through a period of time where I thought I was like a cycle messenger, and so around the time the film Premium Rush came out, that film with what's the guy's name from Inception? I can't remember his name. Is it Joseph Gordon-Levitt? I think Joseph Gordon-Levitt's in the film. But yeah, a film called Premium Rush is basically about a Psycho Messenger who has to do some stuff. Forget what stuff. But anyway, Psycho Messenger. There's a dodgy cop in there somewhere. And so I saw that film and I was like, Psycho Messenger is so cool. I want to dress like a Psycho Messenger. And then I went out there and got myself like an Ortlieb messenger bag, which is like a massive sack that could fit loads of stuff in it. And then I would like wear sort of like cargo kind of shorts or combat-ish shorts and just kind of trying to have that like sort of cycle courier kind of look. And I remember getting a bike. I remember buying this bike. At the time, I thought it was a lot of money, but I thought it was good value for money. But then I kind of started to learn about bikes a bit more. I bought it. It was like £200, and I bought it off Gumtree, and it was a single speed, and so it had like a red painted chain, which is, I mean, that's just weird in itself. This painted chain that kind of flaked paint, but it was matte black. I remember putting stickers on it. I had like different sort of car stickers that I put over it, which I think I got from Max Power or something like that. And the bike had red tires. Didn't really have deep section, but the wheels looked deepish to me at the time. And then, so I had red tires, matte black frame. I put some Ori bar grips on there, and I put some like big sort of flat mountain bike kind of pedals. And I was like, yeah, I'm so cool. And then later on, I think, did I put clip-ins on there? Maybe not. But yeah, I used to think that was really cool. And I love that bike. And then I kind of, through having that bike, I started to learn a bit more about bikes, about the quality of components. And because it was single speed, it was fairly fine. But the fact that it had like nowhere to it had like brakes, but the cables weren't really well routed. They were just kind of cable tied onto the frame. And like, after a while, I think the wheels started to go a little bit wobbly. And then you kind of learn a bit about wheels. And so with the wheels on that, it had like the sort of cup and cone kind of system, which is a cheaper style of wheel. And so the bearings were a bit cheaper. And so the cup that the bearings sit in. So if you imagine on a bicycle wheel, and forgive this bad explanation, in cheaper hubs, you basically have what is like, imagine this is the wheel, and you look at it from the side. There's something that is like a really tiny ball, and the ball bearings sit inside that, and then the axle kind of sits in the hole through the middle of that. And what basically happens is as the ball bearings move around in this bowl, they basically kind of score the shell of the, they basically kind of put marks into this sort of, this bowl. And over time, basically, this gets worn out. And because of the way that these cheaper wheels are designed, this is like one piece that you have to replace. And so the wheel kind of becomes trash after that because most of the components are quite cheap on it. I mean, you could replace the hub, but then, yeah, it becomes a bit of a faff. And they're quite difficult to kind of get well balanced. So I had that bike for a while. Then I kind of started to learn a little bit more about bikes. I think I had like a Marin Muirwood? I think it was a Marin after that. I think it's definitely a Marin that I had for a while. That was a hybrid bike. And I was still kind of on this sort of messenger sort of vibe. And so I had this really massive black coat I used to wear. I remember going to see my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, going to sort of North London to go and visit her. Going up, what's that hill called? I forget the name of the hill, but it's near Seven Sisters. Stamford Hill, I think it was, yeah. So she lived not far from there. And I remember like cycling and the wind kind of just catching this massive jacket and it flapping as I was going down the hill and thinking, yeah, I'm going so fast and I look so cool. And then, so I had that bike, that Marion, for a while, and I would use that to cycle to work. And so I'd ride to work. I'd borrow a bike at work, but that's a different story. I mixed up stories. I'll tell that story another time. But I remember, I never forget, there's a day where I was cycling I started working in Wellington City, and so I'd cycle from where I lived, which was near Elephant Castle, to King's Cross Station. So I'd cycle from King's Cross Station I'll cycle from Elephant to King's Cross Station, and at King's Cross I'd get on the train to Wellington City. Ideally I'd get on the 9:30 train because it was a little bit cheaper, and it was off peak, but to make sure I got there on time, if I need to get there on time before 10, then I would get on the earlier train. The thing about 9:30 trains, if it got cancelled, then you're late to work, and then that was the situation. But anyway, yeah, there was a day where I was riding. I'll never forget this. It was summertime, and there was this guy just kind of like glided past me, and at the time I didn't know enough about bikes to know what it was on, but I didn't know what it was, but I knew that I liked it. it was, and I never forget, he was wearing, it was like a black, I think it was matte black. I think it might have been a Specialized, I'm not sure. But it was a matte black bike, and he had like really neat black clipping shoes on, and then he's wearing like the full cycling sort of jersey and kit, like bib shorts, and I was just like, wow, that guy looks really cool. In my mind, I thought he looked really cool. And as he just kind of glided past me, I tried to keep up with him, but he dropped me, and it was like, yeah, he dropped me like it was nothing. And I remember after that day thinking, I need to get some bib shorts, I need to get a jersey, I need to get some clip-ins. And so gradually I kind of got the bits together, because, you know, cycling, it can be just like modifying cars, very expensive. And so I got some like basic Shimano pedals, some SPD SL pedals. And I remember I got some Mavic strap clipping shoes, road shoes, off eBay, and they were brand new, but yeah, they're off eBay, and they just were just Velcro straps, no boa dials or anything like that. And I really loved that. I was really excited by that. I really loved that those clip-ins. It's just like a different experience. I mean, first couple of times riding on those is a bit crazy, but yeah, I really enjoyed that. And then I got, it was Funkier. The brand was Funkier, and this kind of carbon effect, which is weird, I know. Looking, the bib shorts I thought was a bit much. So I had shorts, and then I had a jersey. But then after a while, I realized that, you know, if you just have shorts, then you kind of get that the builder's sort of bottom bum, and builder's crack that kind of shows when you're cycling, which is really cool. And the shorts kind of not work their way down, but they kind of move around more in ways that you wouldn't like. So got some bib shorts after that, and then our job was a good one. But yeah, cycling. After that, that was it. That was not even the point I wanted to talk about. What I wanted to talk about was cyclists versus drivers. I think it's really interesting that it's kind of like age-old debate or age-old enemies in some ways. So you've got like cats and dogs, Arsenal versus Man U, and then you've got drivers and cyclists. And I think it's really interesting that I think what I've discovered is that I'm kind of biased to the mode of transport that I'm traveling on. And I think that often, you know, if you're someone that's purely a driver, then you look at all cyclists as being idiots. And if you're someone that's a cyclist, then you often can look at all drivers as being idiots. But I think it's more of a case that there aren't necessarily good and bad. It's not that necessarily that one is good or bad, but I think there are good drivers and there are bad drivers. And I think I definitely am biased to whatever mode of transport I'm on at the time. But definitely I've seen drivers that are idiots, and I've seen cyclists that are idiots as well. So, yeah, I think that's an important point to make, you know, that the road's supposed to be shared. Another point about using the road is that cyclists are allowed to ride two abreast. A lot of drivers don't know this. I'm a driver, have a massive love for cars, but cyclists are allowed to ride two abreast on the road. So all those drivers that bib cyclists when they're riding side by side, read the highway code, please, because you are in the wrong. Also, I saw this video, speaking of cyclists and drivers, where they made bus drivers, they made this sort of like rig where a bus driver it's like a stationary bike basically, and they made a bus drive really close past the stationary bike. But the way it was set up was the bike doesn't move, but it's to kind of get the feeling of what cyclists feel. And so I think that's quite a good thing, that I think all people that, maybe even everyone that drives should at some point have to see what it's like to get passed really close by a vehicle, particularly a bus. I think that should be essential training for all bus drivers and large vehicle drivers to have to be in that experiment or that situation where you get passed by a bus when you're on a bicycle, and to see what that feels like. But yeah, that said, I think that kind of brings me to the end of our time today. Went on a bit longer than expected, and I'm hoping that I'll put this out. And I'm hoping that these will get better. You know, it's an interesting thing. I'm used to being behind the camera a lot of the time, and so me being in front of the microphone or in front of the camera, having to set all this up as well is an interesting experience. But yeah, I'm going to continue to talk about cars, continue to talk about bikes, and continue to get better, you know. Yeah, so I look forward to seeing the comments. I look forward to watching this back and listening to this back to seeing if it actually makes any sense. But until then, stay safe.